Hello there, my name's Brandon and I make pictures out of tiny squares. And today I'm going to be making some pixel art in the style and the specs of a Nokia cell phone. Now, back in the days before smartphones, and I guess I'm like old just by setting this up like that, but back in the days before smartphones, the entire line of Nokia cell phones were just like the default phone to have. If you grew up in that Y2K era, it felt like your parents who, maybe until that point just straight up didn't ever have cell phones, they'd go off to the shop. You didn't know what happened at the shop, but they'd come back with some version of this phone. I remember that happening. I remember people didn't have phones ever, and then all of a sudden everyone had Nokia phones. I think there were actual laws in those days that dictated that the Nokia phone needed to be everyone's first starter phone. I could be a little bit hazy as to whether that was legally enforceable, but it felt like that might as well have been the case. What I do remember though, and this is perhaps even more early 2000s than the actual phone itself, if that's possible, but the goal would be to have the Nokia phone and then you'd get the plastic slip pouch case with the elasticated bands on the sides. And what you want to do is you want to have that case long enough so that the plastic starts to crack and the cheap leather starts to flake away, because of course that's going to happen if these are the materials that we use. But that's really the complete Nokia experience that I remember. That's what you want to have. And it's kind of a metaphor for life, I guess, in a way. I don't know what I'm saying anymore, but welcome to this art video. Now, as for the artwork itself, I'm making this for a Nokia art jam that's going on right now, and that's being hosted by Polydux over on Itch. Specifically, this jam is going to be following the specs of the Nokia 3410, which has a resolution of 96 by 65 pixels. And this is just a 1-bit black and white look, which really would be those black pixels over top of the screen, and the phone also had that kind of greenish backlight as well. But in terms of prepping the art, we're just going to do pure black and white. The template I'm using here that already has the time and the battery and the menu text, I got this directly from Polydux, and they recreated that by eye since they've actually got this phone. But I was glad to have that as the basis for my first bit of art here, because the idea that I had was to have a little kaiju monster pet that sits on your home screen, and you can kind of feed it and raise it and then eventually battle it against other kaiju. So it's kind of like this Tamagotchi Pokemon hybrid sort of idea, but as a cell phone game. And I've created this weird monkey sort of pet with spikes and a spiky tail, and that's just kind of one of the kaiju, I guess, that you could have as a pet. So this is for an art jam, so we're actually just submitting images rather than animations or playable games. But I figured I'd make up just a few screenshots to really kind of get a sense of this idea as if it were a real game. And the jam actually even lets you submit multiple entries if you want to. So I might do that. I might submit everything, or I might just pick one and kind of use that to represent it. But either way, I'm doing the battle screen here now. And I wanted to have a layout that was like the classic Pokemon battle screen, but with the addition of maybe seeing some of the skyscrapers in view as well, and sort of having that perspective, just to try to convey the large size of these kaiju. And in general, this is actually a pretty interesting set of parameters to try and make this work within. I'm pretty comfortable working within a Game Boy kind of sizing in general, and this is lower resolution than that, and the aspect ratio is also narrower. It's a bit more rectangular here. So this space is quite tight for these elements, but I think it ended up with a fun sort of simplicity because of that, especially with this 1-bit look going on as well. Along the bottom, I carved out some space for the battle commands, and I'm going to pop in different bits of text around the screen as well. And for this, I actually just looked up the default Nokia cell phone fonts online. You can actually find a lot of reference and actual font files for this sort of stuff, surprisingly. The one I pulled here, I'm just using as a visual reference, so I'm kind of redrawing all the letter forms myself, and just doing a few other UI elements along the way, like the life bars and stuff. And again, even for how simple it is, just having UI graphics like this at all really kind of ties everything together quite nicely. Similarly, I also looked up the appearance of the Nokia logo when it's displayed on the screen as well, and I wanted to incorporate that into a title screen logo kind of graphic for the game. So what I placed down here was just sort of loosely recreated by comparison from a photo of the logo. And then I've laid in just some additional lettering and kind of did that kaiju lettering there with these little sort of egg shapes to have this fun fitting graphical element that way. I kind of roughed up the background lettering there too, it's got sort of a claw swipe going through it. And then to fill out the remainder of the screen space, I took just a few simple icons and repeated them out just as a pattern and created sort of this letterboxing for the whole thing. Now, the last thing I wanted to try was just kind of a quick and dirty way of achieving that dot matrix look of the actual cell phone screen itself. So the first thing we're going to do is to replace the white background with a greenish color. And one that I liked for this is to use a hue of 70, a saturation of 50, and a brightness of 95. That's not any kind of magical number or reference to anything specific, it's just kind of something that I thought looked appropriate enough. But next, we're going to scale up the image by going up to Image, Image Size, and I'm going to scale it up by a factor of 10, or 1000% as it's referred to here. What's important for this kind of stuff is to keep the resize algorithm set to the nearest neighbor setting, and that'll maintain crispy pixels when it enlarges it. So now we can see, it's the same image, but every pixel on the screen is actually a 10 by 10 square. So with this extra resolution now, what we can do is take the 1 pixel pencil tool and start drawing vertical lines between every column of pixels using that green color. And so actually, if I just turn off the background here, you can actually see how I'm painting in these green lines kind of spaced along every pixel. So expanding this across the whole image, you get this all sliced up vertically like that. And then if we duplicate that layer and rotate it to make a set of horizontal lines, we'll end up with kind of the final sort of dot matrix style grid. Again, this is a pretty basic way to go about it, but it's just a nice bit of texture and kind of brings it a step closer to how it'd look on that phone screen. So let's go ahead and take a look at the final screenshots, all done up with this treatment. Here we go. All right, well, there we have it. A little kaiju game for the Nokia 3410. This fun phone graphic, by the way, this is actually a 3D model. And that, again, comes courtesy of Polydux, who's always such a fantastic and such a generous creator, especially when it comes to these sort of like retro, hardware-specific types of pixel art styles. So huge shout out to Polydux, as always. If you're interested, the Nokia Art Jam is accepting submissions until the end of this month. I'll put a link down below for that. But even if you missed that, I'd recommend still just kind of playing around with this style anyway, if you want to, obviously. And we'll close off with some CRT time. So thank you for watching, and take care and keep it square.